Hey everybody, Tony D. Little Joan, I finally put her on the floor and let her run back to the couch. She was driving me nuts. She didn't really want to be in the videos. Very squirmy today. I fed her a bunch of steak. She's got a nice steak bone. She eating it? No. Spoiled little dog. Spoiled little dog doesn't. Oh, a steak bone? Maybe I'll eat that later. That's how much I spoil my dog. But let's check out the rest of the highlights of today's headlines. Obviously, the shooter is dominating the news right now. But other things are happening, including the Biden administration to house unaccompanied migrant kids in San Diego Convention Center. I don't see anything that could go wrong with that. Jesus. Thanks a lot, post-millennial. I got a virus warning. Yeah, that sounds like a terrible idea. And it sounds like you do not have control of anything. If you've got to put people in a convention center just to hold them until you figure out what to do, it sounds like you're screwing the pooch on the whole thing. All right? These kids need to be reunited with their families. You made a big stink about, oh, well, we'll do it. We know how to do it. Evil orange man can't. Hey, you put them in a convention center. Is that where their parents live? Communist activists who favors abolishing prisons and defunding the police to be Seattle's homeless czar. So the communists continue to get promotions out in the Northwest. This is a real problem. I know I joke about the communists. This is a real problem. Do not put communists in any positions of power. They openly state they want communism. They want communism. And they're openly delusional about it because they think things like, well, the gulags, they were really re-education camps where people learned vocations and got paid and had conjugal visits. They actually think these things. So do not hire communists for anything in government, please. But, Biden will learn the hard way. I think Jen Psaki is probably a communist. There's a picture of her wearing a communist Soviet hat that's pink. Speaking of Biden, strong majority of voters think proposed Biden tax hikes will hit middle class. Well, of course it will. Absolutely it will. You don't think the billionaires and millionaires are going to pay that tax, do you? They might pay a little bit. Their accountants will fix that. And then where are you going to get the money for all your largesse? I don't know where you're spending all this money. You're not spending it on helping people. You got this migrant crisis or illegal alien crisis. You're not even testing these people for beer virus. Probably because if you did, you would have to have a facility to quarantine them and cure them and treat them, or you'd have to send them back. I'm not sure what U.S. law is on somebody who has a contagious disease, but you ought to not let them in the country. I mean, that's what we used to do, believe it or not. During the days of Ellis Island, they used to say, ask questions if you didn't have a job and skills. And if you were diseased, back on the boat you go. Yeah. So, keep that in mind when you hear about Biden effing everything up. And speaking about effing everything up, Evanston, Illinois becomes the first U.S. city to pay reparations to black residents. And probably the stupidest city on the face of God's green earth. The Chicago suburbs city council voted 8-1 to distribute $400,000 to eligible black households. Racist, number one. Number two, won't work. Everybody who gets this money will say, it's not enough. Or I didn't deserve it, or whatever. It's going to be a disaster. It's going to be dumb and disastrous. Even though they're going to try to do it, they've only got $400,000. It's not even enough money. There's a lot of black people who live in that area. I mean, it's got to be more than, let's see. If $25,000 is the magic number, it's 4 times 16. I'm sure there's more than 16 black families living in that area. Like, what the hell are you doing? The city has pledged to distribute $10 million over 10 years. I guess. Qualifying residents must have lived or been a direct descendant of a black person who lived in Evanston between 1919 to 1969 who suffered discrimination in housing because of city ordinances, past policies, or practices. How the hell are you going to determine that? It's unbelievable. I predict it's going to be nothing but corruption, and you're going to eventually get news stories about people getting the money and blowing it on vacations and doing stupid stuff with it. And it will shame everybody associated with it who will immediately stand up, well, this wasn't my intent. This is dumb. You can't do reparations. Stop it. 3/4 of Americans support LGBTQ non-discrimination laws. Of course. Nobody wants anybody fired because they're one of the alphabet people. No one. That's fine. Everybody's fine with that now. I know you think there's bad guys from World War II everywhere, but that's not the case. No one cares. You know, I've had friends come out and I go, okay. Well, what do you think? It's none of my business. Well, why are you even telling me? Like, that's my reaction. Like, it's none of my business. You know? It's not, I'm not having sex with you. What do I care? Come out and do whatever you want. It's fine with me. Most people have that reaction. You know? It's not, you know, it's different. You're married to somebody, they come out to you and you're like, uh-oh. Well, that's a different story. But we're talking about people, like, just in general. Certainly your coworkers. Who cares? No one cares. No one cares. Not anymore. Yeah, there were some homophobic people back in the day. It was being gay was new and weird to people, and they got all up in arms about it, and they scared people in the news. Now they're scaring people the other way. Oh, you could be a bigot. You could be a bigot. Next up at 9:00, are you a bigot? Is your baby a bigot? A special test will decide. So just calm the F down. No one cares. So, yeah, it's all about the shooting all day long. No clear winner in Israeli election, but Netanyahu has upper hand in building a coalition. So that the elections are so weird in other countries. They have like this parliamentarian kind of style democracy where it's like, you know, you vote for your representative and then they have to put together a coalition to pick the prime minister. It's kind of why Trudeau is still the prime minister in Canada. Too many of his party are still in parliament. Whatever, Canada has a parliament, right? And so they kind of can't get rid of him. Like, they can't toss their own guy, right? Or they won't, probably. I mean, it would be like the Democrats tossing Nancy Pelosi. They've kind of tried, but they can't get rid of her. It's really tough. You have to do really horrible things to get tossed by your own party. So that's Israel going through its own thing. Netanyahu was up on all kinds of charges at one point, but he keeps beating him back. Women are more likely to have beer virus vaccine side effects than men, which is an interesting fact, considering that men are more likely to die of the beer virus. Isn't that interesting? Fire destroys Long Beach LGBTQ Pride lifeguard tower, according to the Los Angeles Times. Well, that's not good. But the question is, you know, they're freaking out. Is it an act of hate, or maybe it got struck by lightning, or maybe some kids did it by accident, or someone smoking in there, or whatever. So, you know, do an investigation and find out what happened, would be my advice. But that's a shame. Biden extends Affordable Care Act, special enrollment period. Yeah, of course. Problem is, these guys want $15 an hour in minimum wage. Guess what the cutoff is for the ACA? It's $16,600, right? If you make $16,601, you're out of the ACA. Get your own damn insurance, you freeloader. If you make $15 an hour and you work a 40-hour week, your gross pay is, what is that? 10 is 150, 300, 600 a week, 2,400 a month. That's 24,000 a year, and then plus 4,800. So 28,800 would be your salary. You'll never have enough. You'd have to have like $13,000 in tax write-offs to come underneath 16,600 to still keep your ACA health insurance. So was that the plan all along? Pass the ACA and then raise the minimum wage so nobody can qualify for it anymore? Great. That makes sense. Democrats exploiting latest tragedy to push Second Amendment legislation, but clearly know nothing about arms. That's from Tim Pool. It's true. Also from Tim Pool, actually from the Timcast, the U.S. joins the EU in sanctioning China and pissing off the CCP. Good. This could be a good development. Now, I don't want to get ahead of myself here because it could just be for show. Joe Biden could have said, well, I got to do something here to look good and get people off my back for taking all those stacks from China. But it could be that, Biden's a liar and he just took the stacks and said, F you, China. Yeah, I don't have to listen to you, which would be good. I don't know if I trust Biden to do that. Maybe he's just seen the writing on the wall and said, well, I took the stacks, but I can't help these guys anymore. F them. I'm going to screw them. So they've put some sanctions on, but they're very minor. They're against specific Chinese officials, and then the Chinese came back and went after a couple specific officials, I think, in Europe. I don't know if they went after anybody here, maybe one or two. But it's not that big a deal. However, I've always said, and this is true, I believe, sanctions are an act of war. I mean, economic sanctions, that's war. Now, it's not a shooting war, but it's the little baby steps towards full-blown conflict. So, that's why it was so upsetting to see the Democrats push Trump in the sanctions against Russia, because they have a lot of sanctions on them, way more than Communist China. And Communist China should be sanctioned way more. They should be the most sanctioned country if you're going to do sanctions, because they're doing the worst stuff, right? I mean, it ain't no picnic over in Russia, but those guys seem more reasonable these days. And it seems to me we could get along much better with Russia than we could with the CCP. The CCP wants to run the show. The Russians are willing to take a back seat and be more in a partnership kind of thing and be the lesser partner, I think, because that brings them up. They're in rough shape, in terms of their economy. The CCP, they want to run things. Oh yeah, they're in charge. Or go F yourself. And they're brutal. They're absolutely ruthless. If you've ever seen any of the videos coming out of China about how they raise kids, how in schools they actually encourage the students to beat one another. I mean, seriously, they've had teachers beat students. Terrible examples. This is a terrible, terrible example. They are teaching children to be ruthless thugs and mentally scarring them, I'll add, for life. Now, ultimately, I think that will be a defeatist sort of strategy. They will turn their own people into monsters, and they will eat each other alive if given half the opportunity. But because, it's like an old D&D session, right? And the communists are chaotic evil. And if you've got a group of chaotic evil characters or monsters, the only way they stay in line is the lead character or monster is so powerful, the other characters and monsters are petrified of disobeying him because he'll just kill them. And yeah, you can run things like that until your lead bad guy or monster shows a little weakness, and then you've got a complete mutiny on your hands. At the same time, you've got your own guys running around doing stuff on their own, which you have to kind of tolerate until they cross a certain line. And you have to know where that line is. And it gets very, very complicated. And when you're talking about a country the size of China, It's extremely complicated. I mean, they got to spend most of their time monitoring people and trying to keep them in line. And so they have to give them reasons not to just be out for themselves on top of making them ruthless. So when you raise ruthless people, a ruthless society, you also have to try to keep them, in the lane. Or else they'll be like, well, if you're saying to be ruthless, why shouldn't I just kill you and take all your stuff? And you need to present a face like, well, we'll not only kill you, but we'll torture you first, and then we'll kill your whole family in front of you, and then kill you. And see, you have to escalate, right? And then eventually you get an even more ruthless person who, he doesn't even give you a chance. He tortures and murders your family and then comes after you and doesn't even tell you. And then you realize what monsters you've created. So, it's a bad path for China, but I'm glad to see the Biden administration at least pretending to stand up to them. Hopefully they'll continue to do more. I'll believe it when I see it, though. They did give him 2 stacks. Catholic school fires teachers after she disputes cause of George Floyd's death. You cannot blaspheme Saint George Floyd, apparently, in the woke church. It would be very interesting if they could bring George Floyd back to life so he could see all the things that are going on in his name. He'd probably just be like, wow, man, I can't believe this. It would be amazing to see. I remember when Rodney King was being interviewed, and he didn't die because of what happened to him, but, eventually he just broke down and said, can't we just all get along? And it was too much. It was too much for him to bear, I think. All the stuff that went on in his name. He didn't want for that to happen. And I'm sure George Floyd did not want all this. I'm positive. Even though he may not have been the greatest guy in the world, I don't think most people want to specifically cause hurt and suffering all over their communities in the world. What else is going on? Bill Gates wants to spray millions of tons of chalk into the stratosphere to slow global warming. Will that work? Number 1. And will it be harmful? Number 2. Doesn't sound harmful. I mean, chalk sounds pretty harmless. I suppose it would probably be bad to breathe it in, in the long term, but I'm sure you could. I mean, way up in the atmosphere, probably not a big deal. But there needs to be some studies. I prefer Bill Gates working on something like this than working on the vaccine. I think Bill Gates was really out of his league trying to work on the vaccine. I really do. And I get it. He has lots of money and he's a philanthropist now, but seems like he was wading into a very big discussion. This seems more like his speed. You're right. You've got a plan and you're trying it and you got the money to fund it. You could do studies. More power to you, Bill. I wish you well. We talked about that. Man, it's just reparations and the shooters all over Gab Trends. Nope, we covered that one too. Jeez. Do you want your doctor to be anti-racist or competent? Asked WND. I would prefer my doctor to be very competent. Thank you very much. Oh, Soros-backed LADA George Gascon to review up to 30,000 criminal sentences. This guy has been in the news for doing, in my opinion, wacky things like 3 or 4 times, and he's been in office like a few months. I think he got put in just when Biden did. It's like, what is wrong with some of these woke people? These Democrats, they just can't you just go do your job? Can't you just do your job? I mean, what's a DA do in LA? Just prosecute people that are supposed to be prosecuted. I mean, you couldn't do it during the O.J. Simpson trial. I mean, do it against people who you can put in jail, who deserve to be there. Legal team probes Kerry's attempt to sabotage Trump from WND. I hadn't heard anything about that. But go ahead, investigate him. Why not? Wouldn't that be great to watch the Democrats degenerate just like the left and turn on each other? Oh, Be wonderful to watch. Newt Gingrich rips Pelosi for running a machine-like House. Total collapse of the legislative process. I think that's a bit much, but yeah, Pelosi is not good. Not good at all. Kamala Harris laughs after reporter asks if she plans to visit the border. Not today. She has a real problem with that, and when she becomes president, she really needs to control herself in that arena. She should not laugh until it's appropriate. And she just gets nervous and laughs at anything. And man, that is going to come back to bite her in the butt. Big time. All hell breaks loose in Turkey. Stocks halted. Overnight lira implied rate hits 10,000. Ooh, that doesn't sound good. Guess Turkey's taking a hit. Biden considering executive action on gun control, Psaki says. Ooh, that would be bad. That would be extremely bad. And finally, I don't know if I talked about this yesterday, I don't remember, but Trump is returning to social media with his own platform. I think I did talk about this. In several months, according to an advisor. I think this will be great. And I always like to end with a little bit of a white pill, as they say. So the sooner the better. The sooner Twitter just dies, the better. It's going to be interesting to see what happens to sites like the Donald.win and Gab. Will they also suffer because of it? Because I don't think the leftists are going to move to this new site. Not a lot of them. I mean, certainly the blue check marks on Twitter will. And that's going to be trouble for Twitter, but I don't know beyond that. I don't think you're going to get the Twitter mob guys coming in. The Redditors. I think they'll all go to Reddit, quite frankly. And Reddit's really gone downhill in my view. I can barely stomach Reddit now. It's such a shame. Reddit was such a fun site when it started. I had so much fun on Reddit. I met people off of Reddit. It was great. So friendly. And now it's just mean-spirited and awful. But it's that late-stage message board phenomenon I told you about. And Trump's got to be ready for that. If you got to be ready for anything, Trump, you have to be ready for late-stage message board phenomenon to hit your site. Now, it won't at first. I think the process takes about, I'm going to say, in your case, it's not going to take that long. I say within 3 years, it'll probably start to happen as people get territorial about the site, depending on how it's run. But we'll see. We'll see. I look forward to it. I will certainly sign on, and I hope to see you there. All right, that's it for me. Little Jones asleep, and we'll see you tomorrow.